Last week, we discussed the basics of Excel. We discussed how to enter in data and how to change the user interface to look nice, but there's so much more that Excel can do. We can use functions and formulas in Excel to do calculations for us, and that's what we'll be discussing this week. Be sure to download this week's class activity workbook and use it as you go through this week's lecture. You'll be turning in the class activity again for points. Formulas allow us to quickly make calculations using different input values. In other words, formulas can use the data that we put in the spreadsheet to do mathematical calculations for us. We put the numbers in and we tell the software how to process and output the results using our formulas. So far, we've focused on inputting data in Excel, but we haven't told Excel to do anything with it until today. We can use the information we input by using references. Excel allows us to reference a cell or a range of cells in other parts of our spreadsheet or workbooks. This is why we have all the rows and columns labeled. If we put in equals C2, then we're referring to the value in cell C2, and we get back the value in cell C2. Let's open up this week's class activity workbook and look at the worksheet called Reference plus Sum. Remember, you know what worksheet you are in based on the tabs that are labeled at the bottom of the program. Now in this worksheet, you'll notice that there's a box that's red. I would like you to reference the value in cell C3, and you can do this by typing equals C3 in the red box cell. Then hit enter and you'll see that the same number that's in cell C3 will now be in cell C4. We use functions as little programs that allow us to do specialized tasks. Formulas use the functions to do things to the data and give us results for use in other places of our program or spreadsheet. It sounds very complicated, but let's move forward and you'll see what I mean. Here are some basic math functions that are available in Excel. We can add two or more numbers together by using the sum function, or round numbers using the round function. We can find the largest number in a data set by using the max function, or the smallest number in a data set by using the min function. The average or the median or the mode, and so much more can be found using different functions in Excel. We can also use the usual math symbols that we're used to. All of these are able to be used in Excel as well. Now let's try a few of these functions. First, let me talk a little bit about the sum function. We can use it in several different ways. We can use equals sum parentheses 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, end parentheses, and Excel will add the numbers inside the parentheses for us and give us 15. We can also use the sum to add two different values we've entered into Excel. So for example, we could add the value that's in cell 1, C1, and cell C5 by typing in equals sum parenthesis C1, C5, end parenthesis. This is the same as writing equals C1 plus C5. It just adds the two values that are in cell C1 and cell C5 for us. We could use sum to add several different values that we've entered in by using the semicolon to indicate all of the values between C1 and C5, including C1 and C5. Let's give it a try. Go to the Reference plus Sum worksheet again. In the gray box, we want the cells from C7 to C16 to be added together. We can do that in several different ways. We could do C7 plus C8 plus C9 plus C10 all the way to C16. Remember to put the equal sign before you start that entire formula. Otherwise, Excel will think it's just some text The equal sign signifies a formula or function in Excel. Another method to add those cells together is to use the function sum and put the cells C7, C8, C9, etc. all the way to C16. But that's a lot of text to put in. When using functions, you must put the cells references in parentheses to indicate that those are the cells you want the function to be done on. The simplest way to do this is to use the function sum and use the semicolon to indicate you want all the cells between and including the values of C7 and C16. The value that you should get is $7,261,472.42. Here's what your spreadsheet should look like after you've done the sum function. Okay, now let's have you try it yourself. Cell C19, the one with the red lines around it, needs a formula. The value should be your total revenue, which is in C4, minus your total expenses, which is in C17. The value that you should get is $3,241,547.42, but it's in parentheses. The parentheses in Excel are an indication that the value inside is a negative number. So our value is actually negative $3,241,547.42. Another function we can use is count. Count allows us to count the number of number values. Count A gives us the number of non-empty cells, so it includes any text values that we might have. And count blank gives us the number of empty cells that we have in a data set. Let's give count a try. Go to the count worksheet and fill in the formulas for numeric values, non-empty cells, and empty cells. Use the semicolon to indicate multiple cells, and don't forget those parentheses. Here's a screenshot to show you the values you should end up with. As you get more skilled with using functions, you may want to give conditional functions a try. You can use functions like SUMIF or COUNTIF or AVERAGEIF if you want to only count something for customer A, or only average the numbers for patient X, or only sum the numbers for employee 25. There are specific functions that allow you to do this. There's a function for just about anything and everything you want to do in Excel, but we won't be getting into all of them. Just know these basic functions and know there are a lot of different options available for you as you get more advanced in using Excel. Now let's talk about text. Sometimes you want just a part of a long name or text string, or you may want to put two or more text values together. We have different functions to allow us to manipulate text just like we manipulated numeric numbers. We can extract only the leftmost characters or a few characters in the middle, or we can substitute certain words for others. Here's a tip for Excel. When you want to apply a formula to multiple cells, you can use what's called the fill handle, which is the little box that shows up at the bottom right, to drag the formula down to a bunch of cells, or you can double click on the fill handle to copy the formulas down. Let's give a few text functions a try. Go to the text worksheet. You'll find some IDs that need to be combined to create a full ID. I would like you to take the patient ID, the organization ID, and the county ID and put them together to make a full ID. Use the reference cells and the ampersand operator to attach them together. The first full ID should be the formula that's written on this slide. Remember to try out the fill handle box at the bottom right of the cell so that the formula applies to all of the cells below. Now, let's say you had a full ID and you needed to pull the ID parts apart rather than putting them together like we just did. Use the right function to pull the last 2 digits from the full ID and put those in column E. The formula should look something like equals right, parenthesis, D2, comma 2, and parenthesis. Note that if we did equals right, parenthesis, D2, comma 3, parenthesis, then we would get the last 3 digits rather than the last 2 digits. You can use the mid function to pull the middle 3 digits from the full ID and put those in column F, and use the left function to pull the first 3 digits from the full ID and put those in column G. Here's what the text worksheet should look like when you're done. Now, we've referenced within one worksheet, but we also have the option to reference a cell from another worksheet in the same workbook. The easiest way to do this is to type equals and then go to the cell that you want within the same workbook. Excel will automatically pull the worksheet name information for you. Alternately, you can type in the full formula that's provided on this slide. Let's try referencing a value in another sheet. Go to the text worksheet and reference the cell C19, which is the numeric value that represents the total revenue minus the expenses from the reference plus sum worksheet. Put that value in the A13 cell of the text worksheet. The formula should look something like the formula provided on this slide. The references we've done so far are called relative references, but we can also use absolute references. Cell references should only be absolute if you know that the value is supposed to be exactly the same all the time. This is especially useful when you're copying a formula to other locations on the spreadsheet. You can convert a cell reference to be absolute by inserting the $ symbol in front of the row or the column reference you want to hold the same. Let's try to see what this does. Go to the absolute reference worksheet. The worksheet shows the tax rate is in cell B1. If we take what is currently listed as a formula in the sales tax column and drag the formula down using that fill handle button, you can see that it doesn't work properly and we get a bunch of errors because we're using relative references. Change the reference to B1 to $B $1 in the formula for the first sales tax. This makes it an absolute reference and tells Excel to always use the same number. Then, when we pull the formula down using the fill handle, you'll notice the numbers work much better. Be sure to add the sum function to fill in cell E13 and practice your functions a little. Here's what the sales tax column should look like at the end. Sometimes we run into errors when we use Excel, like those errors that we just saw when we were using relative references instead of absolute references. Here's what all of these different errors that you could run into mean. Now that we've talked about formulas and functions, let's look at some other things that Excel offers. Let's start with autofill. Excel is very good at recognizing patterns within data and can help fill in rows or columns automatically. We can use this to save ourselves some time. Let's try this in the text worksheet. Add a column to the left of the patient ID column and label it Testing Autofill. Now, type the number 1 in cell A2 and type the number 2 in cell A3. Then select A2 and drag down to A3. click on the little fill handle that is the box on the bottom left-hand or bottom right-hand corner and either drag it down or double click on it, and Excel will fill the numbers in for you. This is what you should end up with. Data validation is another thing we can do with Excel. It allows us to create rules for what kind of data can be entered into a cell. When you select the cell, an input message can tell you what needs to be entered, and if you enter in something incorrectly, an error alert message can be shown. Here are some of the rules we can put in. We can say that a value has to be a number or has to be a date, it has to be from a list that we create, or it has to be a time value. Let's try data validation using the data validation worksheet. We will work through the tabs to create input and error messages. These are always optional, but there's not always a reason to put them in. Let's start by highlighting cells B2 through B6. We want to allow decimals between the numbers 0 to 100 in these cells. So click on those cells and then click on the Data Validation button under the Data tab. Be sure your cell format has 1 decimal point, and after adding in the information, try entering in 101 in one of those cells and see what happens. Now try and allow 2 characters for the cells C2 through C6. What happens if you try and enter in the full name California? You should receive an error message. Now, what if we wanted to create more efficient worksheets that had drop-down lists where people could select yes or no, or pick a date from a calendar, or pick from a list that you created? We can create drop-down lists by entering the items that we want in the list and then going to Data and Data Validation. In the Settings tab, we allow List, and in the Source Box type, we will reference the cells that we want in that list. Be sure to check the In Cell drop-down box. You can also add an input and error message if you want. So let's try creating a drop-down list using the Create drop-down list that contains a list of the departments that we want included in our list. We want to put it in cell B3 in the drop-down list creation worksheet. Go to where we want the drop-down list. This would be cell B3 in the drop-down list creation worksheet and click on that cell. Then go to the Data tab and click on Data Validation. In the Settings tab, under Allow, select List. Under Source Box, type in equals and reference the cells where the departments are listed. Be sure to check In Cell drop-down box and add an input and error message if desired. Here's what your drop-down list is going to look like in the drop-down list creation worksheet. The last function for this week is conditional formatting. This is a handy tool that allows us to visualize data and look at patterns and trends in our data. We can automatically add colors, icons, and data bars to our data depending on the rules that we set. We create conditional formatting by going to the Conditional Formatting button in the Home tab. We can select the rule we want and add the values we want the rule to apply to. We can also change the formatting style to make the colors different or the general visual to look different. Let's give this last feature a try. Go to the Conditional Formatting worksheet. We know that the statewide percentage of uninsured is 14% in California. We want to see which counties have a rate that is higher than that of the statewide percentage. And we want to make those cells red. Rather than manually going through and looking at every single number and changing the formatting of each of these cells, we can use conditional formatting to do this for us. We select the cells that we want to create the rule for, and in our case, that's cells B2 to B59. Then we go to the Home tab and Conditional Formatting. We can select our desired rule, which is highlighting cells that are greater than a value, and then enter our desired value, which is 14. We can also select our formatting style, which in this case is light red fill with dark red text. Here's an image of what it looks like when completed. That's it for this week's Excel video. I hope you picked up on some good tips and tools for Excel.